My name is Katherine Whitmore. I am 62 years old, and I used to run a small winery just outside Sonoma. People used to say I had a gift for patience, knowing when to let the grapes rest and when to bring them to light. I thought I had that same patience with my son. I thought I understood him, but I was wrong. The day he tried to kill me, I realized patience can also be a quiet way to die. It happened on an old bridge I had crossed 1,000 times before. The wood planks groaned under the tires as we drove, my son Ethan at the wheel, his wife Jillian in the passenger seat pretending to scroll her phone. The air smelled like cold iron and rain. I remember thinking how strange it was that he insisted on taking the scenic route that morning. He said we needed to talk about the estate. He said it gently, but his fingers tightened on the steering wheel each time I mentioned Lucinda, my lawyer. I told him the vineyard wasn't just an asset. It was my life's work, his father's legacy. He smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. "Mom," he said, "you've done enough. It's time to let go." Those words still echo in my head. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to take a deep breath with me, because what you're about to hear isn't just about a bridge or a fall. It's about what happens when someone you love decides you're worth more dead than alive. If you've ever been betrayed by your own blood, stay with me. You'll understand why I didn't scream. You'll understand why silence became my weapon. The car stopped in the middle of the bridge. The river below wasn't deep, but it ran fast, like it couldn't wait to swallow what people threw into it. Ethan stepped out first, gesturing for me to follow. Jillian didn't move. She kept her eyes down, the reflection of water flickering on her face. I thought she was crying. Later, I realized she was terrified, just not for me. Ethan leaned on the railing, pretending to admire the view. I joined him. The metal felt cold under my palms. "You're tired, Mom," he said. "You've been through so much since Dad died. Don't you think it's time to rest?" I laughed, thinking it was another one of his dramatic talks about retirement. But then his hand tightened around my wrist. His eyes went dark, flat, emotionless. "You're old, Mom. It's time to let go." He pushed. For a moment, the world turned upside down. The sky flipped beneath me. The sound of rushing water drowned out everything, even my own heartbeat. When I hit the surface, pain cracked through my body like lightning, but the river was shallow, and luck, or maybe justice, kept me alive. I landed on the rocky edge, half submerged, half broken. I heard their voices above. Jillian gasped. Ethan cursed. Tires screeched. Then silence. They thought I was gone. I remember staring at the bracelet on my wrist, the one Ethan gave me when he was 10. Silver, engraved with the words, "Always hold on." It had cut into my skin when he grabbed me, leaving a thin red mark like a promise. I touched it, and something inside me hardened. Not revenge, not hatred, but clarity. I stayed still until the sound of their car disappeared into the distance. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I waited for the water to still around me, for the air to return to my lungs. When I finally crawled to the riverbank, mud clung to my clothes and blood warmed the cold water around me. I looked back at the bridge, its old wooden frame shimmering in the sun, like it didn't just witness a murder. That was the moment I decided to die, at least on paper. If they believed I was gone, they would show who they truly were. And when they did, I would be watching. Quietly. Patiently. The way I had always watched over them. I tore off the bracelet and buried it in the wet sand, marking the place with a smooth stone. Then I walked, limping, through the reeds until the road curved away from sight. Every step burned, but the fire kept me awake. I followed the dirt path toward the hills, where no one would look for me. The world had turned soft and gray, like an overexposed photograph. I had no plan yet, just instinct. And that instinct whispered, "Don't go home." A truck passed on the distant road, its headlights cutting through the mist. I crouched low, watching, heart pounding. When the sound faded, I crossed the field and found an abandoned shed. The door hung crooked, but inside it smelled of hay and dust, not decay. I lay down on the wooden floor, my body shaking from shock. Outside, rain began to fall, gentle at first, then steady, washing the blood from my hands. Somewhere out there, my son was already rehearsing his grief. I could almost hear him, the choked voice, the practiced tears, the press conference in front of our vineyard's gate. He would say I slipped, that I lost balance, that it was a tragedy, and people would believe him. He had always been good at performing love. But he had forgotten one thing. I taught him how to perform. When morning came, I wrapped myself in an old tarp and walked until I found a payphone outside a closed gas station. My fingers trembled as I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. Lucinda Hale. My old friend, my lawyer, the only person who would know what to do if the world ever turned against me. When she answered, I didn't say my name. I just whispered, "I fell, but I'm not gone." There was silence on the line, and then her calm voice. "Where are you?" I looked at the horizon, the same horizon I used to watch from the vineyard's porch, where I dreamed my son would someday take over honestly. "Far enough," I said. "Close enough to see what they do next." Lucinda exhaled slowly. "Then let them believe the lie," she said. "For now." I hung up, watching the first light spread across the fields. The world didn't look new, but I did. I was a ghost with unfinished business, a mother reborn through betrayal. Somewhere beyond those hills, Ethan and Jillian were already rewriting my story. They just didn't know I was still the author. I stayed off the main roads for 3 days, sleeping under the trees and listening to the world forget me. It's strange how quickly people move on. One day, you are someone's mother, neighbor, friend. The next, you are a story on the evening news, told in past tense. By the time I reached the outskirts of a small coastal town, my face was already on missing posters pinned to gas station windows. A tragic accident. That's what the headlines called it. Ethan's voice played through every news clip. He sounded heartbroken, just enough to be convincing. Jillian stood beside him, her makeup soft, her hands clasped as if in prayer. "My mother was the strongest woman I knew," he said. "We can only hope she's found peace." Peace. That word used to mean something to me. Now it just sounded like permission to erase me. I watched from a diner across the street, wrapped in an old raincoat, my reflection blending with the glass. The waitress refilled my coffee without a word. People whispered about the bridge, about the river that kept its secrets. Someone said they were planning a memorial gala at the vineyard. My vineyard. My home. I smiled to myself, a slow, bitter smile. That night, I rented a room above the diner under a false name. My ribs ached, and my hands were raw, but my mind was clear. I found a prepaid phone in my coat pocket. Lucinda must have sent someone to drop it near the shed where I hid. When I turned it on, a single message appeared. "Call when safe." I called. Lucinda's voice came through steady and low. "They filed for power of attorney 2 days after the news broke," she said. "The bank accounts, the house, the company, all frozen until the death certificate clears." "So fast," I whispered. "They were ready," she replied. "This wasn't impulse, Katherine. They planned it. I can slow the process, but you need to stay invisible." "I can do that," I said. My voice sounded calm, even to me. Good, she said. Let them think they won. Every move they make now will leave a trail. When I hung up, I sat in the dark room for a long time, staring at the pale glow from the street lamp outside. Dust floated through the light, like slow snow. Somewhere below, someone played old country music on the jukebox. The song was about second chances. I almost laughed. The next morning, I went out early and bought a newspaper. The front page showed Ethan standing in front of the vineyard gate, arms around Jillian. He looked solemn, dignified, like the perfect grieving son. In the photo, I noticed something. My silver bracelet on Jillian's wrist. The same one I had buried in the mud. She must have found it when they came back to the bridge to search. She wore it as if it belonged to her. As if I never existed. I folded the paper and slipped it into my coat pocket. Sometimes anger can keep you warmer than fire. Later that day, I found a small library and used the computer to look up my own name. The search results were endless. Articles, sympathy posts, donations. Someone even started a memorial fund in my honor, managed by Ethan's new foundation, the Whitmore Legacy. I clicked on the website. His biography said he was continuing his mother's dream of sustainable winemaking. My stomach turned. He had even uploaded old photos of us together, captioning them with phrases like, "in her spirit." He had turned me into a brand. I closed the browser and took a slow breath. The air in the library smelled of old paper and forgotten lives. The silence there felt sacred, like it could protect me. But I knew silence could also be a weapon, one I was still learning to use. That evening, I called Lucinda again. "He's moving fast," I said. "There's a new company name, the Whitmore Legacy Foundation." "I've seen it," she said. "He filed under his own signature. The documents list you as deceased." "Then I'm officially dead," I murmured. "Not yet," Lucinda said. "We can contest it, but that would expose you. Better to let the papers breathe. Sometimes the law works better when it believes in ghosts." I leaned against the window, watching the smoke from a chimney drift into the twilight. "How long can I stay invisible?" "As long as it takes to catch him," she said. "But we'll need evidence. Hard proof." I thought about the bracelet on Jillian's wrist, about the way Ethan spoke to the cameras. The kind of proof I needed wasn't just legal. It had to be human. Something that would show the world who he really was when no one was watching. That night, I wrote in an old notebook I found in the room. Day 4 of being dead. Then, I thought losing my name would feel like losing myself, but it feels like freedom. For the first time, I can see who they really are. In the following days, I walked through town under a different name, buying groceries, reading every headline that mentioned me. Each article twisted the story a little more, like a mirror fogged with breath. Jillian gave an interview on a morning show, saying she would honor my legacy by continuing the vineyard's charity work. Her voice trembled just enough to make people love her. But her eyes, they betrayed her. I knew that look. It was guilt hiding behind mascara. By the end of the week, Lucinda called again. "They've submitted documents for probate," she said. "That means they're preparing to transfer ownership of the estate. I can stall, but only for so long. I need your signature for something important." "Impossible," I said. "If they see my name on a document." "They won't," she interrupted. "Leave that to me. For now, keep your distance and watch. If they start moving money, we'll trace it." "Understood," I said. After we hung up, I stood by the window, staring at the faint smoke rising from chimneys across the town. It reminded me of the winery's early mornings, the smell of wood fire and fermenting grapes. There was something holy about that smoke. It carried the scent of patience, of time doing its quiet work. I realized then that revenge, if you can even call it that, doesn't have to roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it just waits. The world thought I was gone. My son thought he was free. But smoke has a way of finding its way through cracks, and silence can fill every room until someone starts to listen. The library became my hiding place. Every morning, I sat by the same corner window where sunlight fell in thin lines across the table. The old computer hummed softly, and I used it to trace pieces of my old life. Names, records, transfers, dates. Lucinda sent encrypted messages through a private email chain under a name that looked like a gardening newsletter. Each message carried small fragments of information, breadcrumbs scattered through legal documents and public filings. Together, they formed a map of what my son had been building behind my back. It began with the winery's accounting books. I had always handled the finances with the same care I used when blending wine. Slowly, precisely, never in haste. But Ethan had learned to hide sour notes beneath the sweetness. He had created a shell company, Marin Estate Holdings, 3 months before the bridge. On paper, it was a supplier. In truth, it was a funnel. Money moved from my vineyard into that company, then into accounts offshore. He had been draining the roots long before he cut the vine. Lucinda confirmed what I already feared. "He's using your presumed death to finalize a consolidation," she said over the phone one evening. "He's applying for a declaration from the court. Once that's granted, everything with your name transfers to him. It's clever. Cold, but clever." I closed my eyes. The idea of being erased from my own life felt worse than the fall. "How long do we have?" "Not long," she said, "but enough if we act smart. There's a digital trail. You always said he was careless with details." "He still is," I said. "He learned greed, not patience." That night, I dreamed of my vineyard, the rows of vines stretching toward the horizon, the soft hum of the irrigation lines, the smell of earth after rain. In the dream, I was walking down the aisle between vines when I heard Ethan's laughter as a boy. He was chasing a paper plane that danced in the wind. I bent down to catch it, but when I looked up, he was gone, and the field was empty. The paper plane burned in my hands until it turned to ash. When I woke, my eyes were wet. I wasn't sure if it was grief or fury anymore. Maybe both. Lucinda asked for copies of my old contracts, anything with original signatures. She needed proof that I was still the legal owner. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had to prove I existed while pretending not to. I mailed her a package using an alias, sliding the envelope into the outgoing slot at dawn. No one saw me. The sky was pale blue, the color of detachment. A few days later, I found a live stream from the vineyard. Jillian was hosting an event, a fundraiser, she called it. She stood on the terrace where I once held harvest parties, smiling under string lights, her hand resting on her belly as though protecting something precious. The caption below the video read, "Baby Whitmore is due this fall. We dedicate tonight to Katherine, whose spirit guides us still." I stared at the screen. Pregnant. Maybe she was. Maybe it was another performance. The crowd clapped when Ethan joined her, raising a glass. The camera caught his face, confident, handsome, hollow. I muted the sound and studied his expression. There was no grief there, only calculation. I printed every article, every screenshot, and spread them across the motel bed. The papers looked like puzzle pieces of a story they were writing without me. But I was still the editor. Lucinda called again that night. "I found something," she said. "Transfers from Marin Estate Holdings to a new account. The beneficiary's initials match Jillian's maiden name." "She's helping him move the money," I said. "Maybe. Or maybe she's afraid," Lucinda said. She's been signing documents under duress before. I can see the timestamps. 2 signatures appear seconds apart, hers and his. He's pushing her. She made her choice, I said quietly. Maybe. But fear makes people do strange things, she replied. I sat in silence for a moment, watching the curtain sway with the breeze. Fear did strange things, yes, but guilt did too. And guilt had a habit of surfacing like wine sediment when the bottle was shaken. Later that evening, I walked to the pier just outside town. The sea was calm, dark, endless. I thought about how Ethan used to stand beside me at the vineyard's pond, skipping stones. He would count the ripples, always trying to beat his record. I wondered when those ripples stopped being circles of joy and started becoming calculations. When I returned to my room, another email from Lucinda waited. She had attached copies of bank traces, wires, transaction logs, foreign accounts. It was a web of deceit so intricate it almost looked beautiful. Beneath the columns of numbers, she wrote, "He filed a petition to declare you legally deceased. Hearing scheduled in 2 weeks." I read the words twice, then again, until the letters blurred. Legally deceased. The phrase felt heavier than death itself. It meant finality. It meant surrender. But I had no intention of surrendering. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, listening to the faint hum of cars outside. Somewhere in the distance, a foghorn sounded. I thought of Ethan's words on the bridge. It's time to let go. Maybe he was right, in a way. It was time to let go, but not of life, of illusions, of the belief that love could blind me forever. I took a deep breath and whispered to the empty room, "You want a ghost, Ethan? Then you'll get one." In the morning, I wrote a letter in neat cursive on hotel stationery. It wasn't for him, but for the world that had already buried me. I signed it simply, KW. Then I folded it, sealed it, and left it under the motel lamp. Some truths needed light more than witnesses. Outside, the wind carried the smell of salt and rain. I looked up at the gray sky and thought of the vineyard's hills, of the bridge, of everything I had built with hands that now trembled. My story wasn't over. It had just gone underground. And from there, roots always find their way back to the surface. Lucinda always believed that silence is a form of strategy. People show their truest selves when they think no one's watching, she once told me. So when she proposed sending a letter to test Ethan's nerves, I agreed immediately. The letter would be simple, an official inquiry from a financial auditor, referencing my estate, my investments, and a request for updated accounting. It wasn't meant to accuse. It was meant to provoke. We mailed it to the old vineyard address, the one Ethan had turned into his headquarters. Then we waited. For 3 days, nothing happened. The world moved in slow motion, as if holding its breath. I spent the time in a small rented cottage near the cliffs, living among strangers who didn't ask questions. The ocean roared outside my window each night, reminding me how small betrayal really is when measured against eternity. On the 4th day, Lucinda called. "He took the bait," she said. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the satisfaction beneath it. "He called the bank twice within the hour. Then he contacted a private investigator. Name's Noah Price." I froze for a second. "Noah?" "Yes. You remember him?" I did. He used to work security for the vineyard years ago. Honest, quiet, loyal. He was the kind of man who noticed everything and spoke little. The last time I saw him, he'd helped me after a break-in, fixing the fence himself because the contractor was late. "Ethan hired him to confirm your death," Lucinda continued. "He's supposed to find proof, a body, a record, anything." "And what do we do?" I asked. "We let him look," she said. "But I'll reach out quietly. If his loyalty still lies where I think it does, he'll be our eyes on the inside. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks mixed with memories that refused to stay buried. I kept seeing Ethan as a little boy sitting on the kitchen counter, dipping his fingers into grape juice, his smile purple and proud. I had told him then that good things take time, that real sweetness can't be rushed. He had nodded like he understood. Maybe he did, and maybe that was the problem. In the morning, I walked into town and bought a burner phone. The shopkeeper didn't look up from his crossword puzzle when I paid in cash. I slipped the phone into my pocket and wandered through the small farmer's market nearby. The scent of apples and roasted coffee filled the air. Life went on, even for ghosts. By noon, a message appeared on the screen. "He's in, checking records, will confirm." It was from Lucinda. I spent the rest of the day pretending to be a normal woman, drinking coffee by the pier, reading the local paper, watching children feed gulls. But inside, I was counting every hour. If Noah was who I remembered him to be, he'd recognize the lies Ethan was spreading. If not, he'd become another piece on Ethan's board. 2 days later, I received an unmarked envelope at the cottage. Inside was a folded page torn from a notebook. On it were just a few words written in black ink. "Still loyal, watching. N." I stared at the note for a long time, the handwriting firm and deliberate. Noah had found me, or at least found enough to know where to send it. That meant he was playing a dangerous game. That evening, Lucinda called again. "He's close to Ethan now," she said. "He's in meetings, pretending to help with financial documentation. Ethan's nervous. He asked Noah to verify that the bridge footage was destroyed." "Bridge footage?" I said. "Yes, from the car dash cam. He claimed it malfunctioned that day, but I suspect he tampered with it." I looked out the window toward the sea. The horizon glowed faintly pink, calm and deceptive. "If that footage exists, we'll find it," I said. Lucinda's voice softened. "You sound steadier than before." "I've stopped bleeding," I said quietly. "That helps." Over the next few days, I kept to the routine. Morning coffee, quiet walks, checking the phone every few hours. Each message from Lucinda was a small pulse of purpose. The plan was unfolding like the slow tightening of a knot. Ethan's panic was spreading behind the scenes. He had built his empire on paperwork and charm, and now both were starting to crumble. On the 5th night, Lucinda called one last time before she flew out to meet Noah in person. "He trusts her," she said. "Jillian believes Noah is working for them. That will give us time." "What about me?" I asked. "You wait," she said. "You'll have your moment soon. For now, let the letter do its work." After the call, I stepped outside into the night air. The ocean wind brushed my hair, cool and relentless. I looked up at the stars, so clear they seemed carved into the sky. Somewhere inland, my sun was unraveling under the weight of a single envelope, a reminder that ghosts don't rest easily. I thought of how he had pushed me, how sure he'd been that I would disappear into the water without a sound. But he never understood the difference between silence and surrender. One ends things, the other begins them. I whispered into the dark, "You should have left me in peace, Ethan. You should have known better than to teach your mother how to play your game." The waves answered with a crash against the cliffs, like applause for a truth finally spoken aloud. I met Noah again on a foggy morning behind an old supply warehouse near the edge of town. He arrived early, leaning against his car with his hands in his pockets, the way he used to stand outside the vineyard gates years ago. His face had aged in the quiet way that good men do, lines etched by time, not regret. When I stepped out of the mist, he didn't look surprised. He just nodded once, like he'd been waiting. I didn't think you were really gone, he said. Most people didn't think at all, I replied. He smiled faintly. He's losing control. Your son's been calling me twice a day. He thinks someone inside the bank is leaking information. He doesn't realize it's his own conscience that's slipping. What have you found? I asked. He opened his coat and pulled out a small recorder, the kind journalists used before everything went digital. He talks too much when he's angry. Jillian tries to calm him down, but he's unraveling. I can get him to say more. Be careful, I said. Ethan's learned to read fear. So have you, Noah replied quietly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The fog moved between us like breath. Then he handed me a small envelope. Lucinda told me to give you this. She says it's time to set the hook. Inside was a list of dates and meetings, board sessions, account transfers, private dinners. Lucinda had arranged everything with surgical precision. If Ethan thinks you're truly gone, she said, he'll get sloppy. We'll catch his words before he realizes they can haunt him. Noah returned to the vineyard the next day under the guise of verifying security footage and insurance claims. From what he told me later, Ethan welcomed him like an old ally. He even poured me a glass of your wine, Noah said over the phone that night. He made a toast. To new beginnings, he said. The man's proud of his crimes. I listened in silence, staring at the small lamp on the cottage table. Did you record it? Every word. Days passed in a blur of waiting. The air outside grew colder, the wind sharper. Each morning I walked to the cliff and watched the sea crash against the rocks. The rhythm of it reminded me of heartbeats, steady, relentless. When the call finally came, I knew it would change everything. Noah's voice was calm, but beneath it I could hear adrenaline. He slipped, he said. We were in his office. He was ranting about the audit letter, about how you should have stayed gone. Then he said something he shouldn't have. She hit the railing harder than I expected. My hand trembled slightly. You got that on tape? Clear as a bell, he said. Lucinda has the file now. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I thought of that day on the bridge, the cold metal, the echo of his words. I thought of how he had watched me fall, how sure he'd been that the river would finish the work. Good, I finally said. Let him keep talking. The truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to exist. Later that night, I sat at my desk and wrote a note in my journal. The first sound of his undoing wasn't a confession. It was my silence. A few days later, Lucinda called to say she had secured the recording and filed it under a private legal seal. We'll release it when the time is right, she said. For now, let him think the walls are soundproof. Meanwhile, Ethan's household began to crack. Jillian had started appearing in fewer photos, her smile growing thinner each time. Social media painted her as the grieving widow-in-law, but her eyes told another story. Fear, guilt, maybe both. Noah noticed it too. She's breaking, he said one evening. I caught her watching me from the hallway. She asked if I ever think about the people we lose. I told her some ghosts don't stay quiet. She's afraid of the wrong thing, I murmured. She's afraid of him, Noah corrected. And maybe of what she's become. That night, I lit a candle and watched the wax pool at its base. The flame flickered with each gust of wind from the window, but it didn't go out. I thought of Jillian, trapped in a house full of lies, holding on to a life she didn't earn. Part of me pitied her. Another part waited for her to make a choice. 2 weeks after Noah's recording, Lucinda reported that Ethan had started transferring funds again, small amounts this time, like a thief testing locks. She traced each movement, documenting everything. He's getting reckless, she said. When pride turns to panic, truth usually follows. That evening, as I walked along the beach, I saw a reflection in the wet sand. the sky burning gold over the water, a single bird flying against the wind. It looked fragile, but it kept going. I whispered to the wind, "That's me." Back at the cottage, Noah sent one last message before his phone went dark for the night. He thinks I'm loyal. Jillian suspects I'm not. This won't hold forever. I typed back, "Hold long enough." I turned off the lights and sat by the window, listening to the faint hum of the ocean beyond the cliffs. Somewhere inland, Ethan slept soundly in a house filled with stolen peace, unaware that his own words were now the seeds of his downfall. He had built his kingdom on lies, but lies don't last forever. They crack, they crumble, they echo back to their maker, and when they do, silence speaks louder than any confession. Lucinda once told me that justice isn't loud, it's thorough. That thought stayed with me when she called early one morning, her voice crisp and measured. "We have a problem," she said. "Ethan hired someone to erase the recording." I sat up in bed, the phone pressed to my ear. Erase it? He found out about Noah's device, or at least he suspects it. He's bringing in a hacker to clean up everything digital, emails, server logs, even the vineyard's camera system. I got out of bed and poured myself coffee, my hand steady despite the storm rising inside me. Can he do it? Maybe, but I built redundancies. The audio file was stored in 3 places. If he wipes one, the others stay hidden. The problem is, one of those backups sits on a server that traces back to my office. If he gets that far, he'll know I'm helping you. Then we move faster, I said. Lucinda sighed softly. We're trying. Noah's feeding him partial information, pretending to cooperate. But the hacker, someone named Chase, is skilled, young, confident, and probably expensive. The name sounded like trouble. Can you track him? I already did, she said. He's been hired under an alias. I'll reach out quietly. After we hung up, I sat by the window watching the fog roll across the cliffs. The sea looked restless, like it knew a storm was building somewhere far out. I thought about how fragile evidence could be, how truth, once caught, had to be guarded like a living thing. Later that day, I called Noah through the secure line. How close is he? He's in the office now, Noah said. Ethan's pacing like a man cornered. Jillian's in another room crying again. The hacker's setting up his laptop. They're trying to access Lucinda's network. And you? I'm pretending to help, he said. I slipped a flash drive into the system before they started. It'll make it look like the deletion worked, but it's just a decoy. I smiled despite the tension. You're getting good at this. I had a good teacher, he said quietly. Hours passed. Every minute felt like a coin dropping into an empty well. At sunset, my phone buzzed again. A single message from Lucinda. They tried. Backup safe. I exhaled slowly, feeling the weight lift from my chest. The truth was still alive. That night, I sat outside on the porch of the cottage, the cold biting my skin. The stars above the ocean shimmered faintly, distant and indifferent. I thought of the bridge again, of how easy it is to destroy something and how hard it is to rebuild. The next morning, Noah called. He's furious, he said. The hacker swears the data was gone, but Ethan doesn't believe him. He fired him on the spot. Said something about loyalty being a currency no one can afford. Is he right? I asked. Maybe, Noah said. But I think loyalty is something you earn, not buy. I looked out at the rising sun. Keep close. To him. He'll make another mistake soon. Over the following days, Ethan's behavior grew erratic. He began calling board members at strange hours, demanding updates on projects that didn't exist. He canceled orders, redirected shipments, and closed the vineyard's tasting room for renovations. From the outside, it looked like business. But I knew better. It was Collapse wearing a suit. Lucinda managed to retrieve the full video file that Chase had tried to destroy. It showed the car approaching the bridge, the timestamp matching the day of the incident. The footage cut abruptly, but the sound captured a faint echo, a struggle, a shout, and then water. When I watched it for the first time, my breath caught. The sound of the water hitting the microphone felt like falling all over again. Lucinda's voice over the call steadied me. "This is enough," she said. "Not for court yet, but enough to prove you didn't just vanish. With the audio and the video together, the story will turn." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Keep them safe, off the grid. If something happens to me—" "Nothing will happen to you," she interrupted firmly. "You're the calm in this storm, Katherine. Don't forget that." Her words lingered long after the call ended. Calm in the storm. Maybe that's what survival really is. Not running from chaos, but learning to move through it quietly. That evening, as I walked along the shoreline, I noticed the tide pulling small shells back into the sea, leaving faint traces where they had rested. It reminded me of evidence, how even when someone tries to erase the past, it leaves imprints if you know where to look. Back at the cottage, I found a message from Noah waiting. It was brief. "Jillian asked me if you're really gone." I stared at the words for a long moment before replying, "What did you tell her?" His answer came quickly. "I told her the dead don't make phone calls." For the first time in weeks, I laughed. Softly, but real. Ethan thought he could erase me from the world, but he didn't understand that some stories don't disappear when you delete them. They simply hide, waiting for the right moment to resurface. I turned off the lamp, letting the darkness fill the room. The sound of the ocean carried through the open window, steady and endless. I whispered to the night, "You can bury truth under silence, but silence remembers." Somewhere out there, Ethan was realizing that ghosts aren't as easy to control as he thought. And this time, it wasn't his turn to watch. It was mine. By the time autumn came, the vineyard looked like a stage set for a play I no longer belonged to. Strings of lights hung between the old oak trees. The terrace was polished until it gleamed, and banners with my name fluttered in the wind. They called it the Katherine Whitmore Memorial Gala. The irony was almost poetic. I watched it unfold through a tinted car, window parked down the road, my hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The evening air smelled of grapes, candle wax, and performance. Lucinda sat beside me, elegant as ever in a dark suit, her phone glowing in her palm. "Noah's already inside," she said. "He says the room is full. Donors, journalists, board members, Jillian's hosting." "And Ethan?" "Late. He wanted to make an entrance." "Of course he did. He always had a taste for timing." When I finally stepped out of the car, Lucinda touched my arm. "You don't have to do this in person." "I do," I said. "He took my name. I want to see what he does with it before I take it back." She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Then remember who you are. Don't let anger be louder than truth." I adjusted the wig and the simple black dress Lucinda had brought for me. To the world, I was Kendra Hale, a distant cousin of Lucinda's who had come to pay respects. It was a mask, but one I wore easily. After all, I had already practiced being a ghost. Inside, the vineyard glowed with golden light. The band played soft jazz, the kind meant to fill silence without demanding attention. Faces turned as Jillian stepped to the microphone, her gown shimmering under the lights. She looked thinner, more fragile than before, her smile stretched tight like glass about to crack. "Tonight," she began, her voice trembling just enough, We honor the life and legacy of Katherine Whitmore, a visionary, a mother, and a woman who built something beautiful that continues to thrive. The crowd clapped politely. I stayed near the back, close enough to feel the hum of the sound system vibrating through the floor. My name echoed through the room like it belonged to someone else. Then Ethan appeared. The crowd brightened as he took the stage beside Jillian, his arm around her waist. He looked immaculate, confident, rehearsed. "My mother believed in patience," he said. "She believed that time reveals all truths. I hope she was right." I smiled to myself. She was. Noah moved quietly through the crowd, pretending to photograph the event. I saw him lift his camera, tilt it slightly toward the stage, and give the faintest nod in my direction. The small gesture meant one thing. It was time. I approached the open bar, speaking softly to one of the attendants. "Could you tell Mrs. Whitmore that her cousin from Carmel is here? Kendra Hale." The young man smiled and hurried off. A moment later, Jillian's eyes found me across the room. For an instant, she froze. Her hand slipped from her glass. The color drained from her face. I raised my drink slightly in greeting. She recovered quickly, forcing a smile as she made her way toward me. "Kendra, right? From Carmel?" Her voice quivered on the last word. "That's right," I said, extending my hand. Her fingers were cold. "You look well. The vineyard suits you." "Thank you," she said, her eyes darting around. "It's been hard without her." "I imagine so," I said softly. "Losing someone like Katherine, it leaves a mark." Her lips trembled. She was everything to us. Was she? I leaned closer. Because from where I'm standing, she's still here. Her eyes widened. I saw the panic bloom, raw and unguarded. Her glass shattered against the floor. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Ethan appeared instantly, his hand gripping her arm. "What happened?" Jillian shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. She said she's here." The crowd murmured. Cameras flashed. Ethan shot me a look, sharp, assessing. "And you are?" "Kendra Hale," I said, calm and steady. "I used to know your mother." He smiled, that same calculated charm he always wore when cornered. "Then you must know how much she loved attention." I met his gaze without blinking. "I know how much she loved honesty." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then Jillian whispered something that cut through the silence. "She's not gone, Ethan. She's not." Every camera in the room caught it. Her voice cracked, raw and trembling. Noah lowered his camera, meeting Lucinda's eyes across the room. The message was clear. We had what we needed. Ethan tightened his jaw, trying to smile, but the mask was slipping. "My wife's been under stress," he said to the audience. "Grief does strange things." But the crowd was already buzzing, the reporters whispering to one another. Jillian's outburst had lit a match in a room full of gasoline. I stepped closer to Ethan, close enough for only him to hear. "You built this night on a lie," I said. "But lies don't age well under light." He stared at me, his eyes narrowing. For the first time, I saw fear flicker behind them. I turned to leave, Lucinda falling into step beside me. "It's done," she said quietly as we exited into the night. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. The music inside faded into the distance, replaced by the chirp of crickets and the faint hum of cars down the road. I took off the wig and let the wind touch my hair. Lucinda looked at me. "You didn't need to say anything else. Jillian did it for you." "She always would," I said. "Guilt has a voice louder than mine." From the road, we could still see the glow of the vineyard's lights. They shimmered like false stars, beautiful but borrowed. For years, I thought love could blind me to deceit. Now I understood. Love doesn't blind you. It just asks you to look deeper, even when it hurts. As we drove away, Lucinda's phone buzzed. A message from Noah. Recorded everything. Her confession is on file. I closed my eyes and leaned back against the seat, feeling the road beneath us hum like a living heartbeat. The gala was over, but the performance was only beginning. The truth had finally stepped into the light, and for the first time since the bridge, I felt something close to peace. Not victory, not vengeance, just the calm that comes when the mask finally cracks. The morning after the gala, the air around the vineyard felt different. The press had flooded every corner of the estate, their voices like flies around a wound. Headlines spread faster than wildfire. Widow breaks down during memorial. Inheritance mystery at Whitmore Vineyard. Jillian's trembling confession had rippled through the internet overnight. Ethan tried to hold control, but the more he spoke, the more hollow his words sounded. I watched it all from the safety of a rented farmhouse 2 towns away. The television flickered in the corner as Ethan's image filled the screen. His smile was tight, rehearsed. "Grief can make people say strange things," he told the reporters. "My wife is still recovering." He always knew how to twist sympathy into strategy. But behind the charm, I saw something new. Fear. Lucinda's call came just before noon. "He's desperate," she said. "He's been trying to reach Jillian all morning. She won't answer." "Where is she?" "At a motel outside the city. She contacted Noah. She wants to talk." "About what?" Lucinda hesitated. "She says she's ready to tell the truth, but only to you." For a long moment, I said nothing. Part of me wanted to let her drown in her guilt. Another part, the mother still buried beneath the strategist, wanted to hear her side. "Tell Noah to bring her to the lake house," I said. "We'll keep it quiet." By evening, the sun dipped low behind the hills, turning the water copper and gold. I waited on the porch as a car pulled up the gravel drive. Noah stepped out first, scanning the property before opening the passenger door. Jillian emerged, wrapped in a long coat, her eyes red from crying. When she saw me, she froze. "You're real," she whispered. I nodded. "Very." She pressed a shaking hand over her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I thought you were dead, Ethan. I know what he did," I said quietly. "What I don't know is what you did." She looked at Noah, then back at me. "At first, I thought it was a scare tactic. He said he just wanted to frighten you into signing the transfer papers. But when you fell, when you didn't come back up..." She broke off, sobbing. "He told me to stay quiet, said it was an accident. I didn't believe him, but I was afraid." "Afraid of losing him?" "Afraid of losing everything," she admitted. "The house, the life, the image. I let him make me part of it." Her voice cracked, thin as glass. "But now I can't sleep. I can't eat. When I saw you at the gala, when you looked at me, I knew it wasn't over. I want to help. I'll testify. Whatever you need." Her sincerity felt real, but I had learned not to trust appearances. "Why now?" I asked. "Because I'm pregnant," she said softly, "and I don't want my child to be born with his father's shadow." The words hit harder than I expected. For a moment, I saw not the woman who betrayed me, but the girl I used to be, naive, hopeful, clinging to love even when it rotted. Before I could respond, Noah's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression tightening. "It's him," he said. "Ethan. He's tracking her phone." Jillian's face drained of color. "He knows?" Noah nodded. "We need to move, now." We barely made it inside when the sound of tires screeched on the gravel outside. Headlights cut through the windows. A shadow moved near the porch. A man, large, deliberate. My pulse quickened. "Stay behind me," Noah said, drawing a small flashlight from his jacket. He flicked it once, signaling to the security camera Lucinda had installed earlier. A backup alert would go directly to her office. The door handle turned. Noah shouted, "Stop!" A voice replied, low and cold, "I just need to talk to her." "Ethan." He stepped into the doorway, his face half lit by the porch light. His expression was strange, calm, almost tender. "Mom," he said, "you don't have to hide anymore." "Hide?" I repeated. "You mean live?" He smiled faintly. "You were supposed to rest. You weren't supposed to make this harder." Behind him, movement flickered. A man I didn't recognize stepped out of the shadows, his hand tucked inside his coat. My heart sank. A hired threat. Noah moved faster than I could think, pushing me toward the hallway. "Go!" he shouted. A scuffle broke out near the door. I heard the sound of something heavy hitting the ground, then footsteps retreating into the night. By the time I reached the porch again, both men were gone. The air smelled of rain and fear. Minutes later, Lucinda's car roared up the driveway. She jumped out, breathless. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," I said, "but it's begun." We found Noah half a mile down the road, standing beside his car. The other man was gone, his tracks leading toward the forest. Noah's shirt was torn, his knuckles bloodied, but he was alive. "He sent someone to clean up the mess," he said. "I made sure he failed." Jillian sat in the back seat, shaking uncontrollably. I opened the door and knelt beside her. "You wanted to help," I said. "Now's your chance. This ends through the law, not the river." She nodded, her tears falling silently. We drove through the night toward Lucinda's office, headlights carving tunnels through the fog. The silence inside the car was thick, but not empty. It was the kind of silence that comes after a storm, when survival feels heavier than fear. As dawn broke, we reached the city. Lucinda parked by the courthouse steps. "We'll file the protective order and the initial complaint," she said. "He crossed into criminal territory last night. That's all we needed." I stepped out of the car and looked at the sunrise spilling over the skyline. The light felt clean, merciless. "He thought he could erase me," I said, "but he only erased himself." Lucinda put a hand on my shoulder. "You're not done yet. The world still thinks you're dead. We'll use that." Jillian looked at me through the car window, her eyes pleading. "I'll tell the truth, everything." I nodded. "Then tell it loud enough that he can't talk over it." We walked up the courthouse steps together, our shadows stretching long across the pavement. For the first time since the bridge, I felt my feet firmly on the ground. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the reckoning. The fog over the valley was thick that morning, the kind that blurs the edges of everything it touches. I parked near the same bridge where my son once decided my life was worth less than his ambition. The boards creaked beneath my shoes as I stepped onto the weathered wood, the air damp and metallic with memory. I came alone, or at least that's what Ethan would believe. In truth, Lucinda was listening through a phone in my coat pocket, and Noah waited a half-mile away with a camera angled toward the bridge. Ethan's car appeared from the mist, its headlights slicing through the gray. He stepped out slowly, immaculate as ever, wearing the same kind of confidence that once charmed investors and dinner guests. But it looked thinner now, stretched over something brittle. "I didn't think you'd actually come," he said. "I've been here before," I replied. "You made sure of that." He looked past me at the river below. "You could have stayed gone. Everyone believed you were dead. You had your freedom. Why ruin mine?" "Because freedom built on a lie isn't living," I said. "It's just another kind of drowning." He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. You don't understand, Mom. You never did. I was suffocating under your shadow. You built everything, but you never let me have it. You always needed to control it, even from the grave. I didn't want control, I said. I wanted you to earn it. He laughed bitterly. Earn it? You made me dependent. You made me weak. All my life, I've been the son of Katherine Whitmore. Do you have any idea what that does to a man? Yes, I said quietly. It makes him forget who taught him everything he knows. For a moment, the only sound was the water moving below us. Then he stepped closer, his expression softening just enough to be dangerous. You can still walk away, he said. Sign the transfer, disappear again. No one has to get hurt. I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. You already made sure of that the first time. He frowned. You're not recording this, are you? I tilted my head. Would it matter if I were? He smirked. You think anyone would believe a ghost? You'd be surprised what people believe when the truth plays in your own voice, I said. He froze. What did you do? I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small silver bracelet he had once given me. It caught the morning light, flashing like a blade of memory. Do you remember this? I asked. You told me to hold on. His jaw tightened. What is that supposed to mean? It means you should have listened to yourself. From somewhere in the distance, a faint click sounded. The wireless signal Lucinda had been waiting for. The tiny recorder built into the bridge railing began to capture every word. Ethan took another step forward. You can't scare me, Mom. I'm not here to scare you, I said softly. I'm here to let you speak for yourself. His voice rose, trembling between anger and panic. You think this will fix anything? You think a recording will undo what's already been done? No, I said, but it will show who you really are when the mask falls. He took a step closer, so close I could see the faint twitch beneath his eye. You pushed me to this, he said. Everything I did because you never trusted me. I trusted the part of you that deserved it, I whispered. You buried that part yourself. His breath came faster now, his composure slipping. You should have stayed in the water. And you should have learned how to swim, I said. He stared at me for a long time, his chest rising and falling. Then, in a voice quieter than the wind, he said, I didn't mean to push so hard. You hit the railing and slipped. It wasn't supposed to happen that way. The confession hung between us, raw and trembling. I stepped back, my eyes never leaving his. But you drove away, I said. You watched the water move and thought it would erase me. His lips parted, but no words came. I opened my hand and let the silver bracelet fall into the river below. It hit the surface with a faint splash and vanished beneath the current. That was the last thing tying me to your lie, I said. I'm done holding on to it. Ethan's shoulders sagged. He looked suddenly small, like the boy who once asked me to teach him how to ride a bike and cried when he fell. What are you going to do now? He asked. Nothing you haven't already done to yourself, I said. The rest is out of my hands. He turned away, staring at the river as if it could rewrite the past. You think you're better than me, he muttered. No, I said, just stronger where it mattered. The wind picked up, carrying the sound of approaching sirens. Lucinda's final move. Law enforcement had been waiting for this moment, for the confirmation they needed. Ethan heard it too. His eyes darted to mine, panic flickering there for the first time. You set me up, he said. I let you speak, I answered. That's all. He took a step back, his voice breaking. You're my mother. I still am, I said quietly. But love doesn't mean silence. Not anymore. As the sirens drew closer, Ethan dropped to his knees, his face pale and empty. The officers would find him there minutes later, caught between guilt and disbelief. I turned away and walked to the edge of the bridge, looking down at the river that had once been my grave. The surface shimmered with light, calm now, as if forgiving. I took one deep breath and whispered, "It's over." When I turned back, Lucinda stood by her car, phone in hand, eyes steady on me. She nodded once. Noah watched from the hill, camera lowered, his expression unreadable but sure. The bridge creaked beneath my steps as I walked toward them, each footfall lighter than the last. Some ghosts haunt the living. Others remind them they can still be redeemed. I chose to be neither. I chose to walk away. By the time the sun rose the next morning, my name was no longer a whisper. It was on every major network, printed in headlines across the country. Missing heiress, found alive. Son under investigation for fraud and attempted murder. The story traveled faster than the wind ever could. Every version twisted the truth in small ways, but the heart of it was real. I was alive, and the empire my son had built on deceit was beginning to crumble. Lucinda called before I had even finished my first cup of coffee. "We're in motion," she said briskly. "The district attorney wants a meeting this morning. They're treating it as both a financial and criminal case. You'll need to sign affidavits for the recordings and the video evidence. Are you ready?" "I've been ready since the bridge," I said. At the courthouse, the steps buzzed with reporters, microphones, and flashing cameras. Noah guided me through the crowd with quiet authority, his hand light on my shoulder. It felt strange to move openly again, to exist in the world without hiding. The murmur of voices rose as we entered the marble hall, words like miracle and revenge tangled together like vines. I ignored them all. Inside the prosecutor's office, Lucinda spread out the documents on the table like a general laying out her battle map. "We're filing 3 motions," she said. "First, to reinstate your ownership and freeze Ethan's accounts. Second, to charge him with elder financial exploitation. Third, to introduce the recordings and dashcam footage as evidence in an attempted homicide investigation." The assistant district attorney, a woman named Grace Hollis, nodded. "Once these filings go public, the press will devour him. We're coordinating with the State Financial Crimes Unit and the IRS. It's a full sweep." I signed each document slowly, feeling the weight of every signature. "Every paper I put my name on feels like reclaiming a piece of myself," I murmured. Grace smiled faintly. "That's exactly what this is." Outside the office, cameras waited like hungry birds. Noah guided me through the flashes, his steady presence grounding me. "He's going to come after you again," he said quietly. "I know," I said, "but this time, I'm not alone." That afternoon, Lucinda held a brief press statement, carefully measured and deliberate. "Mrs. Whitmore is cooperating fully with law enforcement," she told the crowd. "All allegations are supported by verifiable documentation and digital evidence. We ask for privacy as the investigation unfolds." Ethan, meanwhile, launched his own counterattack. His lawyers claimed I was mentally unstable, suffering from delusions brought on by trauma. They petitioned the court to order a competency hearing, suggesting that I had staged my disappearance in a fit of paranoia. It was a desperate move, but one that bought him time. Lucinda was furious. "He's trying to turn you into the unreliable narrator of your own story," she said. "Then we'll show them I still know how to tell the truth," I replied. The court scheduled the competency evaluation within days. I walked into the small, sterile room where 2 doctors waited, their pens poised. They asked about the bridge, the months in hiding, my decisions since returning. I answered calmly, clearly, never once raising my voice. One of them asked, "Why didn't you come forward sooner, Mrs. Whitmore?" "Because sometimes the only way to survive is to disappear," I said. "And sometimes the only way to be heard is to wait until people stop pretending they already know your story." The evaluation lasted hours. When it was over, the younger doctor smiled softly. "You're sharper than most people we see," he said, "and far more patient." "That's my specialty," I replied. The report came back the next morning, competent, lucid, entirely sound. Lucinda sent it to the court with a note attached. "Justice delayed is not justice denied." The judge accepted the findings and lifted Ethan's petition. From that moment, his case began to unravel. The banks froze his assets, the board removed his authority, and the district attorney's office confirmed charges were pending. On the evening news, they showed footage of him leaving his lawyer's office surrounded by flashing lights and shouted questions. He looked thinner, almost hollow. Jillian's statement aired later that night, her voice steady as she told the world what really happened. "Katherine Whitmore is alive because she never gave up," she said. "I helped cover what I should have exposed. I'm sorry." Watching her speak, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, but release. Guilt had been a heavy chain on her, and now she was finally setting it down. The days that followed were a blur of filings, interviews, and news cycles. My phone never stopped ringing, but the noise didn't touch me anymore. I spent my evenings at the farmhouse, drinking tea and writing letters, one for the district attorney, one for the judge, and one I never sent, addressed simply to Ethan. In it, I wrote, "You built your world on power. I built mine on patience. Power fades when the room goes quiet. Patience doesn't. It waits until the truth has nowhere else to hide." Lucinda came by the next morning with the final stack of paperwork. "It's almost over," she said. "The trial will begin soon. You'll be called to testify, but most of it will hinge on the recordings." I looked out the window at the vineyard hills in the distance, the same ones that had witnessed everything. "It's strange," I said. "He tried to end me on that bridge, and now the law will carry him there instead." She smiled softly. "Justice has a way of circling back." I returned her smile, though my heart felt heavy. Justice could restore what was stolen, but it couldn't undo what was broken. Still, it was enough to breathe again. That night, I walked outside and watched the wind move through the fields, whispering through the leaves like an old friend. The stars above were bright, unblinking. For the first time in months, I slept without dreaming of the fall. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and polished wood, that particular blend of bureaucracy and finality. I sat near the front, my hands folded on my lap, my bracelet replaced by a simple silver ring Lucinda had given me. It was quiet strength, not ornament. The air was heavy with anticipation, the kind that fills a room right before truth takes the stand. Ethan sat across the aisle, flanked by his lawyers. He looked older somehow, the charm that once defined him stripped away, leaving only exhaustion. Jillian sat behind him, her eyes fixed on the floor. Noah stood near the back, silent as always, steady as a pillar. Lucinda sat beside me, a calm force radiating control. The judge entered, and the courtroom rose in unison. The sound of chairs scraping against tile echoed like thunder. I felt my heartbeat settle into the rhythm of inevitability. The district attorney presented the case methodically. The audio from Ethan's own mouth, the dashcam footage from the bridge, the bank transfers, the shell companies, the signatures forged in haste. Each piece fit perfectly, every lie pinned down by a fact that refused to die. When Jillian took the stand, her voice trembled but never broke. She spoke of fear, of manipulation, of watching her husband lose himself to greed. She admitted to her silence, and she didn't ask for forgiveness, only understanding. He wasn't always this man, she said softly, but he became someone who thought love was ownership, and I let him. When it was my turn, the courtroom seemed to breathe with me. I rose slowly and walked to the witness stand. The wood was smooth under my fingers, worn from decades of other stories told in pain and courage. The prosecutor nodded gently. Mrs. Whitmore, could you tell the court what happened that day? I met her eyes and then turned to the jury. It started with a drive, I said. A quiet one, like any other morning. My son was calm, too calm. He asked about the estate, about control. I thought we were talking about business, but what he wanted was power. And when I said no, he decided that removing me was easier than convincing me. A murmur rippled through the room, but I continued, my voice steady. He pushed me from the bridge. I hit the water and survived. I stayed silent because I needed to see who he would become without me. I wanted the truth to reveal itself. And it did. The prosecutor let the silence linger. Why come forward now? Because patience isn't weakness, I said. It's precision. And justice, real justice, doesn't need anger to exist. It just needs time. When I stepped down, Lucinda squeezed my hand. The judge's face remained unreadable, but I saw the faintest flicker of something, respect perhaps, or understanding. Hours passed. Arguments blurred together. The jury deliberated into the evening while the courtroom emptied of sound, leaving only the hum of the fluorescent lights. When they returned, the foreman's voice was clear. Guilty on all counts. Ethan didn't move. For a long moment, he stared straight ahead, eyes hollow. Then he looked at me. There was no anger there, no denial, only a kind of lost recognition, as if seeing me for the first time. I held his gaze until the bailiff took him away. The room emptied slowly. Jillian stayed behind, her hands trembling as she approached me. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said. But I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be the kind of mother you were. I studied her face, the same woman who had once smiled at me across my kitchen table, who had helped hide the truth, and who now stood trembling with repentance. Then start by being honest, I said softly, with yourself, with your child. Don't let the past raise the next generation. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Later, as the courthouse lights dimmed, I sat alone on one of the benches outside. The night air was cool and gentle, carrying the scent of rain. From my bag, I took out a small envelope, yellowed with time. My name was written on it in a boy's handwriting, crooked, uneven, to Mom. I had found it weeks earlier, tucked inside an old keepsake box Lucinda retrieved from my home after the legal seizure ended. For days, I couldn't bring myself to open it, but tonight felt right. The paper inside was fragile. The ink faded, but still legible. It was a letter Ethan had written when he was 10 years old. Dear Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to take care of you. I'll buy you a big house, and I'll never let you be sad. I'll hold your hand so you never fall. Promise. I read it twice, my eyes blurring. Then I folded it carefully and pressed it to my chest. He did let go, but I didn't. Not out of pride, not even out of anger. Just the quiet certainty that some love, once given, never dies. It just changes shape. Lucinda appeared at the doorway, her coat draped over her arm. You're ready to go? In a minute, I said. She waited, silent, understanding the weight of that moment. I placed the letter back into the envelope and slipped it into my bag. Then I stood, feeling lighter than I had in years. Let's go home, I said. Outside, the rain began to fall in soft sheets, the streetlights blurring through the drops like melted gold. For the first time, I didn't flinch at the sound of water. It no longer carried memory. It carried mercy. The vineyard was quiet again, the way it had been before the noise of ambition drowned out its peace. Morning light spread gently across the hills, brushing the vines with gold. For the first time in years, I stood on my own land without feeling like an intruder in my own life. The trial was over. The accounts were restored. The press had moved on to newer scandals. What remained was silence. And I had learned to love silence. I walked the familiar rows, the scent of soil and grapes reminding me that life has its own rhythm, one that doesn't bend to greed or guilt. The workers had returned, loyal faces who had kept the place breathing while I was gone. They nodded as I passed, quiet respect in their eyes. Some of them had attended the hearing, sitting in the back row just to see justice land softly on its feet. Inside the old farmhouse, a box waited on the table. Lucinda's final set of documents. The transfer of full ownership, the reinstatement of the charitable trust, and a single letter from her written in her neat, precise hand. Katherine, the storm is over. What you do next will define what this story becomes. Let it be healing, not revenge. You've already won by surviving. I smiled. She had always known what to say. Later that afternoon, I stood with Noah at the edge of the vineyard where the new sign was being installed. The Whitmore Foundation for Dignity and Financial Safety. It was simple, but the words meant everything. The foundation would support older adults who had been exploited by family or caregivers, the people who had been silenced by shame or disbelief. The vineyard profits would fund it all. Noah turned to me. You sure you want to give this much away? I looked out at the hills. It's not giving away. It's giving back. The vineyard was never meant to end with me. He nodded, watching me the way someone watches a sunrise, quietly, respectfully. You've turned survival into something that matters. I smiled softly. That was always the point. Later, I invited Jillian to meet me at the office. She arrived nervous, holding a small bundle in her arms, a baby wrapped in a pale blue blanket. Her hands trembled as she set him down in the chair beside her. He's 6 weeks old, she said, quietly. I named him Henry. He looks like you, I said. She nodded, her eyes glistening. I wanted to thank you for not destroying me when you could have. I took a deep breath. Destruction doesn't heal, it only repeats what hurt us. I opened a drawer and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside lay the silver bracelet, the same one I had let fall into the river. Lucinda had retrieved it weeks after the trial when divers searched the area for evidence. The engraving was still clear. Always hold on. I handed it to her. For him, I said. Not for Ethan. For you. For the chance to start differently. Jillian's breath caught. You're sure? I nodded. He deserves to know that love doesn't end with mistakes. Tears spilled down her face. I'll tell him who you are. The truth, not the story people wrote. That's all I ask. After she left, I sat alone in the office, watching sunlight move across the floorboards. Each beam looked like a thread stitching time back together. The vineyard hummed outside, machines, laughter, life returning to normal. That evening, I drove to the bridge. It looked smaller than I remembered, the wood worn smoother by wind and rain. The river below moved quietly, the kind of quiet that doesn't hide anything. I leaned against the railing and let the breeze lift my hair. In my hand, I held a single white lily. I dropped it into the water and watched it float away, carried by the same current that once tried to take me. I forgive you, I whispered. Not to him, not even to the past, but to the part of myself that had stayed clenched too long. As the flower drifted out of sight, I thought of Ethan. He would spend years behind bars, facing himself without anyone left to lie to. Maybe, in time, he'd find something real inside the wreckage he'd built. Maybe not. Either way, the story was no longer mine to carry. I turned to leave, but before stepping off the bridge, I looked back one last time. The water shimmered beneath the fading light, a mirror that no longer frightened me. It was never time to let go. It was time to hold on, to truth, to peace, to the quiet knowledge that some endings aren't punishment. They're mercy. As I drove back toward the vineyard, the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in colors that felt like forgiveness. And for the first time since the day on that bridge, I didn't feel like a survivor. I felt whole.